So we are here today. I'm sitting here with Reverend Kendall Heath, and we are wanting to answer some questions that you might have about INTUERI. And as I was thinking, I came up with a list. And so I hope that these questions might be helpful for you, especially if you aren't able to make our meeting on Sunday, the 10th, or if this is past the time for you. If you are able to join us, I do encourage you to do so. We're going to go into depth and give you the opportunity to answer your questions live. However, if you can't, feel free to email us and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Welcome, Kendall. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Yes.
Yay!
Also, you're so good at this. You're natural. I'm just going to follow your lead.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
no
Thank
problem.
you. Thank you for
Yeah,
this. I think it's a good opportunity to talk with people who might need to hear me talk about this program. Yeah.
absolutely. And you're such a brilliant writer, but sometimes I'm like, man, I just need to know a little bit more about what your vision is so that I can make sure this is the right choice for me and applies to me. I mean, I'm all behind you, but just thinking from the point of view of people
Yes.
who might be interested. One of the questions that I was thinking about, because I'm brand new into exploring the difference between psychic or intuitively aware, in this new part of my journey. So can you kind of address what is the fundamental difference between being psychic versus intuitively aware, or are they the same thing? Can you tell me more on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me just say, if you see me, I didn't want to miss anything. So if you see me looking down at some notes, it's because I really want to make sure that I say everything that I already had in my mind. But to answer this question, you kind of already said it. Like, is there a difference? Essentially, there's not a difference, like at the root. You know what I'm saying? So, what I would say about intuition versus psychic ability is that psychic ability is just intuition that has been given attention. It's like we've paid attention to it, we've developed it, we've honed in on it, and it's how we direct that type of consciousness that is already innate inside of all of us. It is true that some people are a little more naturally gifted, just in the same way that you would be at anything else in life. There's just some people that happen to be better at sports right out of the gate. That's just kind of a common theme.
Mhm.
um, but very few people choose to take intuition and develop it into psychic ability. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of reasons for that. And that's some of the things that we explore in this course. What are all the reasons? Because some of those reasons get stuck in us, and we kind of are in these loops of thinking or beliefs that are limiting, that don't allow us to open this up. So when we're talking about psychic ability, we're talking a little bit more about that I'm intentionally seeking answers, as opposed to like intuitive flashes, that they are also a form of knowing, but they're not as directed. They might not be something that we're going to translate to have some type of more meaningful experience in life. They're just sort of picking up on bits and pieces.
Mhm.
Psychic ability is a deeper exploration into that, where we really need to use the information to inform something. So I think that's what I would say about the difference.
That's
Does-
beautiful. I see that. And I'm almost hearing like like you were saying, we're all gifted with being intuitive in some ways, but it seems almost like with psychic, there's more of like a purposeful effort behind it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you could think of intuition as your spirit's way of communicating with your conscious mind.
Hmm.
Psychic ability is, um, let's really focus in a way where we can get a lot of those more nuanced and subtle pieces of data to unfold in consciousness in a way where we can use it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
since we've said that, I actually have another question. On your website, you said we're going to get more comfortable with various kinds of liminal space and alternative states of consciousness. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so basically liminal states and alternative states of consciousness, those are those spaces where you're leaving your personality, you're leaving your normal egoic structure, you're leaving your regular states of consciousness, and you're going into states of consciousness that um, are what we might call more mystical. They're those meditative spaces where we have moved aside, and more pure essence and more pure information about, what's happening in our environment, what's happening in our spirit, what's happening in life, all that stuff becomes more clear. So one of the things I've always loved as a minister is using the tree of contemplative practices as a way to make sure that we're in practices that take us out of kind of that egoic way of functioning, which is useful, like we have to be there in life, but bring us into more of a spiritual way of understanding that is a lot more simple, a lot more clear, doesn't have all those blockages. So a lot of people, when it comes to liminal space or contemplative space, alternate states of consciousness, they read about it a lot, they hear about it a lot, they watch documentaries, they watch Gaia, they get on a Gaia marathon. But experiencing it is another discipline altogether. It's something that we have to carve out the time for, we have to cultivate the patience for, we have to experience it firsthand. So in INTUERI, in this course, our idea is to meet our best laid intentions, that we would actually get into a regular practice so that we're walking that talk. We're actually participating in direct experience as a learning tool. And when we do this in INTUERI, we're going to try to do it in as many ways as possible, but not like we're throwing everything at it. We're really picking some very concentrated ways to be in those spaces.
I
Does
love
that
that.
does that feel
Absolutely.
clear?
Yeah, and I think that, to me, what I love about this is being held into accountability, because
Yes.
I hear what you mean with like meditative practices, and it's so easy to kind of get busy and set those things aside, and yet, it's such an important practice to have, and I'm excited about seeing the different ways that you can kind of help us organize and get into that is very exciting.
Well, and I'll tell you another thing, Rachel, that I think is important is that we keep this journey in our head so much
Mm.
that it's like we can't figure out why we're not evolving in particular ways we want to, because it's all this cognitive, like it's like, how much information can I collect?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that has to come down in the body in experience. And so this really is a way of saying, listen, this is the part we can't skip.
Beautiful.
You got it.
I love it. I know. And I can too, I think for me too, one of my lessons I've learned in being in that space is that, so many of us are seeking like clarity and action steps and like, okay, I get this. And how do I go forward? And we can really receive, I think, so much guidance in our life in that space. But what I find so often is it's kind of, it can be very nominal things. And
Yes.
just like that trust of like the universe will guide you. We don't have to figure it out. It doesn't have to be like lightning zaps and angels singing, for us to go forward. And so this is really exciting. I feel like you said, there's so much to know, but then experiencing it and bringing it down and practicing is something that's can take a little bit more work, getting it out of our headspace.
Yes, you're right. You're right. And it's always, and once we get down there, the information is so simple,
Mhm.
but it's simple in a way that we pay extra attention because we realize, whoa, I really complicated this. And the answer is right here.
Right here. Yes. It could be pick up the phone and call somebody, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, great. So another question that I had was, when you talk about soul work, like I feel like we're starting to talk about that a little bit, because we're talking about, accumulating information versus going forward and doing. So can you explain, when you say soul work, maybe some of what that means to you?
Yes. It's one of my favorite words. Soul work. So everything I do is centered around soul work. Soul work is the way that we form intimacy with consciousness,
Mm.
the way that we form intimacy with ourselves, the way we form intimacy with our spirit, or what we identify as our higher power, the way we form intimacy with life. And when I say intimacy, what I'm meaning is that we come home to our spirits.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? It means that I learn how to take care of my essence. I learn how to take care of my energy. I learn how to get close to my center, have a really deep relationship with the center of me. I learn how to access my deepest truths, how to express my deepest truths. Um, it's about thriving because we are learning what is truly in alignment for us versus just surviving.
Okay.
So, it's a lot of kind of examining, habitual behaviors, habitual beliefs, limited thought patterns, emotional loops that we're stuck on. And what is the hope whenever we do that? Well, the hope is that we'll clear some things out that are really clogging our experience of alignment and resonance.
Mm. Yeah.
The hope is that we will include all of ourself as opposed to just the self that we approve of, the one that we want everybody else to see. So I say often on the spiritual path, if you're going to do soul work, it's going to involve shadow work because we're wanting to discover what are the parts of ourselves that we keep defining as unacceptable, that we don't want to take with us on the spiritual journey, but that ultimately leads to fragmented existence.
Absolutely.
So soul work says, listen, we're taking all of us on this journey, all the parts of us. We don't have to be stuck in our moralizing super ego, the one that just is always preaching and sort of posturing from that spiritual front. We're
Mhm.
bringing all of us to the journey.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in a way, it's like working to become a real and full human.
Mm.
Like there's a phrase that's used sometimes, a real human or true human. And soul work is saying you're going to have to, it's yes to all the bliss, it's yes to all of the consciousness experiences that get us into states of ecstasy and connectivity and the duality goes away. It's yes to all that, but it's also a no um to how we might, how would I say this, Eh, how we might want to evade being accountable.
Mm.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. And we got to release what we can't control and we have to release what doesn't serve us, but we also have to look at maybe some of the patterns we put in place that we think are spiritual or we think are really healthy, but maybe they're avoidant, maybe they're a
Mm.
little avoidant.
Yeah.
So it's an examination. And when we do that, what we're finding is, you know what? Freedom and peace and compassion and courage and the ability to calm ourselves down and those states of gratitude and stillness, all that stuff is available.
Mm. Yeah.
So, it's kind of like the idea that spirit and body uh, have a better chance at being united.
That's beautiful. I
Does that
really
make sense?
appreciate that. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that, I mean, I'm always shocked at at that balance and how actually by doing that shadow work, in my opinion, it's funny because if you can go through it, it actually lends to more light. It lends
Yeah.
to more enlightenment in the things where you want to be enlightened. And but it's almost like you got to go through it. And it's I love it because it's a cycle. It's never like, oh, I did my shadow work. I think so many of us can when we first start to unpack, there's a lot that we have to unpack. And maybe we, yes, go forward from there. And yet there's always a cycle that we're going through. So that's beautiful. I love that feeling of
Yeah.
completeness, how you've defined soul work. That's really awesome. Thank you for
Yeah, and
sharing
soul work's always a little undone. You know what I mean? Like it's like you said, we're kind of walking this spiral, and we get new layers of consciousness, and we meet something old at that new layer, and then we got to deal with it from that layer, right?
that.
It's like
Mhm.
a never ends. I think when we're maturing on the spiritual path, what we are doing is we're saying, I'm not just here for the ecstasy part of this. I'm here for the holistic experience. It's all of it, right? So
Yeah.
that's really what soul work is. Yeah.
Great. I love that. And
Yeah.
speaking of history and wholeness, so another aspect that I think is super special about you that you bring to this work is a lot of historical knowledge. So, in your opinion, how does this historical knowledge and ancient wisdom um, tie into what you're teaching us, and why focus on that instead of just future oriented information?
That's a good question. So the spiritual landscape that's available to us is timeless. It is without time. So we could say that whenever something is brought into human experience, some major truth anywhere on the timeline of humanity, we can say that that's timeless, right? So as an interfaith minister, which is my primary calling, an inner spiritual minister, one of the things that I value is that there's really not oftentimes a need to recreate the wheel. It's like the wisdom has been passed. It established itself at some point in history, and it was so true that it was never changing. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot to draw on that's already there, and to discount all of the avatars, we would say the Buddhas and Jesus, and to discount what they have already uncovered, to discount the sacred texts that were written, to say all of that's irrelevant, um, really just isn't sound in terms of spiritual science. It's like everything is available in real time.
Yeah.
So I really think that it anchors us down into the fact that we do have an ancestral lineage. We do have a spiritual lineage. We do have DNA encoded within us that has wisdom that has been accumulated throughout different experiences of your incarnation as a soul. Um, and all of that has sort of a quality where it builds up inside of a person.
Hmm.
So all of it matters. And again, you can't move towards the future if you aren't being informed by the past. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. That's beautiful, and to me, it's such a beautiful way to tie it into our personal histories and our greater history as a
Yeah.
whole. That's
Yeah.
really neat. So, in thinking about that, it reminds me of something that you talk about a lot, embodiment. Um, can you tell me more about that and how that ties into this conversation we're having about soul work and learning timelessness and things that are all pulling in together?
Yes, yes. So you hear a lot about embodiment these days, from the somatic therapy world, and when you're looking at it through that lens, it has its own definition.
Mhm.
So I won't go into that, but what I will go into is there's also something called spiritual embodiment.
Mhm.
And spiritual embodiment is, we're kind of back to that idea that the body is the meeting place where the spiritual world and the material world come together. It's a meeting place of a lot of different realities. So when we talk about spiritual embodiment, we're saying, what is my embodiment of my direct experience with the divine?
Mhm.
How do I live that what's my lived experience of spirituality, that's grounded inside of my body?
Okay.
And so when we are practicing spiritual embodiment, we're looking to see, can we get our soul and our physical experience on the same page? It's kind of like, if I have gifts that I need to express from the soul, there needs to be some union of that. So I may want to live a spiritual life, but the things that I'm doing in my body are draining my energy. They are, making it so that I'm in a state of dis-ease all the time. I may have survival issues on the ground that need to be addressed, and so that can't be, left out of the equation.
Mhm.
Um, and I also think that when we talk about spiritual embodiment, we're saying there's a lot of layers of consciousness that we can connect on. So let's find out how we can be embodied in a way that makes that connection possible.
That's
Does that
beautiful.
make any sense?
Absolutely. Kind of reminds me a little bit about what we were talking about before, that sometimes we can get into spiritual work and we almost use it as an avoidance tool.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's really, really interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot, but I'm curious on your perspective. How do you consider yourself, or how are you different from other spiritual teachers that are out there?
Well, I'm pretty different. I don't mean to say that just because I'm an Enneagram 4. I'm just well, how am I different? It's very important to me that this is a grounded experience. And what I mean by that is go off into the ether, chase all the fantastical, phenomenal stuff because it exists and it's there and you can do it. But come back to this dimension where you are purposefully here. You're
Mm.
purposefully
Mhm.
here. Some would say you chose this journey, right? So how can I be grounded and relatable and help people to feel less alone? How do I say, listen, I'm also living a householder's path, and the householder's path has unique challenges that are different than if we're living off in an ashram, in the East.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one way, the groundedness. Another thing is that I always needed to know the why. I don't Were you like that, Rachel?
I like to understand. Yeah.
I'm like, if you can't tell me the why, then I got to go do a whole lot of research. Okay. So and what I mean by that is that there often is a why, but it gets skipped over, right? Because people just sort of assume that there's a truth here. They've seen it 1,200 times online. They're going to adopt it. I really think it's important to get away from pop culture spirituality
Mm.
or the more immature versions of spirituality that kind of dumb it down. And
Mhm.
so that why is really important. It's like, that's that whole saying, instead of giving you a fish, I'm going to teach you how to fish, right?
Mhm.
So my first love is being a teacher in that particular way.
Mhm.
Um, I believe in dialogue. So, as you know, with Lighthouse Fellowship that we do every other Sunday that we've had for years, we're a dialoguing church. Well, I believe in dialoguing classrooms and dialoguing relationships because it's through shared wisdom and through getting things to move up to the throat, this motor here, so that we can articulate, right, together. So, dialoguing is a thing here. Um, I've been on this path for, it's funny, I don't know the exact because I think I've said 25 years for the last 5 years. But I'm 45. I started this journey when I was in later high school. Um, I've been through a lot of the phases of this path. They're similar to what happens when you're in a new relationship with somebody. It's like honeymoon phase ends, right? And then we have to deal with what's happened in real life and how that's impacted our spiritual journey. And so I've lived through a lot of that. Um, so that's probably another thing. And then I would just say, I guess because I have that interfaith, inner spiritual perspective, it's important to me that the look that we take is very broad, and that you can distill it down where it feels right for you. But we're looking at universal things. You know, I went interfaith direction because I couldn't pick just one thing.
Mhm.
It's God is too big for that, right?
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, how do we take it all in, but put a manageable boundary around it, and then understand what is ours to do. So that broad look, I'm really going to take a lot as well.
Yeah.
This journey isn't just a new age journey. That's a facet of spirituality. It is very holistic in terms of what all is possible for mind, body, and spirit.
I love it. It sounds like there's a lot of respect and autonomy, and there's a lot of respect and that I've seen from you in like, hey, you got to figure this out for yourself, and don't like what I hear when you say that, and what I see in a lot of teachers is like, I'm going to tell you the right way to be. And there's kind of this like blind following, which then leads to what you were talking about. Then you put a spiritual leader up on a pedestal, and then you go through limerence, and there's only one place to go when you're up on a pedestal. And kind of, instead of realizing like the why, like we need the why so that we understand why we're doing this. So we don't then put people on a pedestal, so that we can be on this journey all together. while at the
Yes.
same time looking to you who has experience, it's both things. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that pedestal thing, what's so dangerous about that is that if I got somebody on a pedestal, my power is outside of me.
Mm,
I'm not really, and by the way, this makes me not the fan favorite for some people who need to do that.
mm,
Okay?
mhm.
Because you'll see that I'm a human being and you'll see that, I'm not interested in that. And some people need an outside thing.
Yeah.
So we're in it together whenever I am working in any capacity, teacher, student. We are so in it together.
Yeah. I love that. I think that makes you really special, and
Oh,
why I really appreciate knowing you and working with you. But to wrap this up for people who are watching, what will we gain from taking this course?
okay. That's like such a loaded question.
Right now.
Yeah. Well, besides everything we just said, right? There's a lot that we said in there. What I think that people will gain is the main thing is understanding that this is not as complicated as we make it.
Mm,
And yet it does require our deep attention in a lot of different areas. So holding those two things at once and understanding that, okay, so it's not as complicated as I make it. Well, then what am I supposed to do with this, right? Then how should I maybe look at this a little differently? How should I maybe practice this a little differently? This is an immersion.
mm,
And being an immersion means that I'm going to ask you to come to the table in a way where what you bring to this matters just as much as what I bring to it. We're in some type of partnership together, and you will find out what you are capable of if you commit.
mm.
And in doing that, it's like, I didn't do this for you. You did this for you. But I came in as a guide to say, stay right here, that keep looking forward, stay right there, or that thing that you don't want to open, let's go ahead and open it together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in more than anything, it's like you don't have to do this alone.
Mhm.
Um, when I put together any kind of teaching or programs, the amount of combing through to make sure I have considered so many different things, it's like I pour everything I've got into it.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody in this program will experience that. So aside from all the things we've already said and all the emails, and I think you could go back and look at the bullet points, but I would say in essence, that's what's going to happen here.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I personally am super excited. And for any of you out there who are listening to this before the 10th, if you want to jump on, we're doing a Zoom call where you can ask your questions live, 5 p.m. Eastern time. I forget standard time, whatever we are. East Coast time. And or email us our questions. And we're kicking this off January 6th.
I know,
Great
it's
kick off
exciting.
2024. It's so exciting, and it is going to be
Yeah.
a journey. Kendall, thank you for joining us this morning. And I hope that this answered people's questions, and that I know we've got a lot, seats are filling up fast. So I hope people can make the decision to join us. I think it's going to be a great journey.
I think it's going to be great too. And I don't know if we said it, but we would just say, if you want the Zoom link, I think we're going to probably post it below this video or make it a
Okay.
little more public. Okay.
Great.
But they can email us where if they have more questions. Where do you want the emails?
Let's see. Do I have the community at lighthouse.com?
Yeah. Community at lighthousespiritualcenter.com. Yeah.
Yep. That's the
And
one.
Rachel, I just have to say before we hang up, I'm so glad that you're joining us because they don't really know. They're getting like some TLC with you being there, and you are a healing facilitator and spiritual facilitator in your own right. And so I'm really excited about, what you're going to bring to the table too. This is going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yay!
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who joined us.
Thank you.